Let's talk about something kind of tricky, the relationship between Islam and the West. What's the first thing that pops into your head when you hear the word Islam? For a lot of people, the answer is, well, it's complicated, right? It's all tangled up in headlines, politics, and this feeling of fear and suspicion.
So let's just get straight to the point. What are we really asking here? Are Muslims in the West a threat we should be afraid of? Or are they a potential bridge between worlds?
Okay, to really get into this, we have to start with the fear. We just have to. Because look, this isn't just some abstract political debate. For a lot of folks, this feels like a huge civilizational question about the future of Western identity itself.
You hear this argument a lot, right? Some critics will describe radical Islam as a kind of death cult, something that just can't coexist with liberal democracy. The real heart of this concern is this idea of a major value clash, a worldview that, in their eyes, puts the afterlife above the laws we live by here and now. And that, well, that's seen as a direct challenge to everything the West stands for.
But okay, this is where it gets more complicated. We've got to peel back a layer here. So on one hand, you've got this very real fear about a clash of values, a threat to democracy. But on the other hand, you have the reality on the ground. And the reality is that Muslim communities aren't a monolith. They're incredibly diverse. That radical faction, yes, it's dangerous, no question, but it's a tiny, tiny fraction of a global community of almost 2 billion people. So the key, the absolute key, is separating the actions of a very small group from the identity of a massive, diverse population.
And a lot of this fear gets boiled down into one specific, powerful idea, the Great Replacement Theory. You've probably heard of it. It's this narrative that there's a kind of demographic and cultural takeover happening in Europe driven by Muslim immigration. It's a really alarming story, and honestly, it's gotten a lot of traction.
So what do the actual numbers say? The story warns of this tidal wave, right? But the data paints a very different picture. Let's take France, which is often at the center of this whole debate. The Muslim population there is about 10%. Over in the UK, it's closer to 6%. Now, don't get me wrong, those are significant communities, for sure. But it's a long, long way from a demographic takeover.
You know, what's fascinating is that this kind of anxiety, it's not new at all. In fact, when you look back at history, you see these same kinds of fears popping up again and again. And looking at those historical echoes, it gives us some serious perspective on what's happening right now.
I mean, just think about Catholics in Protestant countries like England or America.
For centuries, the accusation was always the same: dual loyalty. Their real allegiance, people said, was to the Pope in Rome, not their own nation. And that suspicion, it led to riots, to being shut out of politics, to all kinds of discrimination. Sound familiar? Or look at the tragic history of Jewish communities in Europe. It's a heartbreakingly similar pattern. A small minority gets scapegoated for all of society's problems. Their influence gets blown way out of proportion until they're seen as this existential threat. And we all know the catastrophic consequences that followed. And it happened in the US, too. During World War II, more than 120,000 Japanese Americans, most of them American citizens, were rounded up and put in internment camps. Why? Not because there was any real evidence of treason. It was based purely on fear and suspicion. The lesson from all of this history seems pretty clear, doesn't it? We have a tendency to overreact when we're scared of a minority group. And that overreaction, it causes incredible damage. Okay, so if going down the road of fear and exclusion is the wrong move, and history suggests it is, then what's the alternative? What's the right path? Well, this brings us to a really practical strategy for integration, a way to build a strong, unified society that doesn't force people to erase who they are. The model that's proposed is something called the hybrid model, and the logic behind it is actually pretty simple. Be firm on the things that absolutely matter and flexible on the things that don't. So, what does that look like? It means you are rock solid on core civic values, the rule of law, individual rights, that kind of thing. Non-negotiable. But you're flexible when it comes to cultural expression. It also means you work to ensure people have economic dignity, you encourage them to be active citizens, you champion the reformers within those communities, and, this is huge, your security is laser-focused on actual extremists, not on an entire community.
So why does a model like this actually work? Well, for one, when you give people a real stake in their society, you pull the rug out from under the extremists. You undercut their entire message. When you integrate people without demanding they give up their identity, you build trust. And that trust, that's the magic ingredient. It gives Western Muslims incredible credibility, not just at home, but on the world stage.
And that credibility, that's the key that unlocks this final and maybe most powerful idea. See, this isn't just about fixing a problem we have at home. This is about grabbing a huge global opportunity. Okay, so you've heard the term fifth column, right? It's that classic fear of a hidden group inside your country working to bring it down from within. Well, this idea completely flips that on its head. It asks, what if, instead of a fifth column, this community could be a fifth bridge? Not a threat that undermines, but a powerful, unique connection that actually links civilizations together.
And look, this bridge idea isn't just some nice-sounding metaphor. It's a real practical strategy. Think about it. A successful, thriving Muslim community in the West is the ultimate living proof that Islam and democracy can work together. They become your best ambassadors against extremism because they can effectively counter both the jihadist narratives abroad and the far-right narratives at home. Their very existence is undeniable proof that the extremists on both sides have got it all wrong.
When you boil it all down, the strategic logic is super simple. When you alienate people, you just hand a victory to the extremists. You prove their narrative for them. But when you practice inclusion, you completely dismantle their argument. You create the ultimate counter-narrative, millions of people who are proudly Muslim and proudly Western. It's that simple.
Which really brings us to the final big question here. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Maybe the question isn't, can Muslims integrate into the West? Maybe the real question we should be asking is this: does the West have the wisdom and the foresight to create the conditions for them not just to integrate, but to truly thrive? To thrive as full citizens at home and to become those essential bridges to the rest of the world.